So, good evening. Good evening. I'm Mary Irons, President and CEO of the College of Physicians of Philadelphia, and I'm happy to welcome you all here to this Spotlight event. The College of Physicians of Philadelphia has been in existence since 1787, and the section on public health of the college holds events. We hold a Grand Round series that raise events of importance, elevate events of importance to public health in Philadelphia, and also a Spotlight series that really focuses on specific events of interest to the medical and the public health community and to the public. And so tonight's event has been organized by Dr. Cherian Verghese and is focused on the Alzheimer's epidemic, disease-modifying therapies and clinical trials that offer hope. So I am going to introduce the two speakers for the evening, and then I will let them take over and for the rest of the night. So Dr. Cherian Verghese is the medical director of Keystone Clinical Studies. He's a clinical assistant adjunct professor at the Temple University Department of Psychiatry. Dr. Verghese is a physician-investigator who's dedicated his career to developing new medications to treat neuropsychiatric disorders. Originally obtained his medical degree in India and then completed training in psychiatry and neurology and received board certification in India, the UK, and the USA. He will be followed on the panel by Regina Vaughn. We're very happy to have Ms. Vaughn here. Regina is a second-generation member of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, the Philadelphia Heritage Branch. She served as the president from 2011 to 2022, and her lifelong study of African American history began in high school, when she took part in a citywide student protest demanding Black studies be included in the school curriculum. The focus of their remarks, Dr. Verghese is going to speak on senior moment or Alzheimer's disease, the role of early diagnosis and intervention, and Ms. Vaughn is going to speak on the same topic from the community lens and why communities of color should consider clinical trials. And we're hoping that we all learn a lot more about both of those topics tonight. So I will hand this over to Dr. Verghese.
Thank you very much, Dr. Irons, and thank you to the college for making this happen, and thank you, Ms. Regina, for helping us put this together. Everybody here and out there, thank you all for being here, especially those who braved the traffic to get here in person. It's very nice to actually meet people and get to know people and have conversations. You guys on Zoom, you missed it. The topic we have today is the Alzheimer's epidemic. And one really doesn't think of a disease like Alzheimer's being an epidemic. You think of something like cholera, tuberculosis, or COVID being something that is, transmissible and becomes an epidemic, or HIV. But really, if you look at the numbers of this disease, it is becoming a scary epidemic that we don't have much to offer at this time. But we do think that disease-modifying therapies that are in clinical trials will offer hope. And it's wonderful that the section on public health of the college is helping us put this together to get the message out to our community that this is a problem and these are the symptoms of it and this is what we can do. And we do believe that when science and the community get together, wonderful things happen. It's great that we have ASLA here, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and folks representing the community like Deacon White, so we can get this message across. We call ourselves Keystone Clinical Studies, not just to fly the Pennsylvania flag, but the concept of the keystone. If you look at the arches up there, the keystone is what connects the two sides. Without the keystone, the whole arch collapses. The road cannot be built on the bridge. So a trial site like ours is that connector between two sides. One side is the science side, and the other side is the community. And here we are talking to you as members of the community. So we see this very important role of the trial site. So this is part of the section of Public Health and Preventive Medicine Spotlight series, and the purpose here is to get an audience to have an interactive process and spark discourse and maybe have action. It's not just enough to talk about something and agree and nod our head and say something should be done. Who's going to do it? It's us. Because if we want treatments, we want answers for this horrible disease, we need to do something. It's often said, somebody should do something. We are the somebody. So this is going to be, it was designed by the college to be responsive to public health issues that are of concern to our region. Just the numbers, the Metro Philadelphia area has about 6.2 million people, of which about 20% are above the age of 60, and about 25% are people of color. So this is something that affects all of us, and you'll see that the prevalence rates among people of color is much higher than in the Caucasian population. So this is something that is very relevant to our region. So we would very much like you to take part in the Q&A section of this conversation, both online and folks who are here physically. We do have a dinner reception after this, and wonderful to sit and chat over dinner. And this is a message from the college to join the college, especially the physicians out there. You don't have to be a doctor. It's for people who are connected with the medical profession. Help bring public health concerns to the forefront and create a forum for how to address this. So that's me at our office, Keystone Clinical Studies, and that's Ms. Swan, who will be addressing you in a little bit. This title is something we also use, a senior moment for Alzheimer's disease. Often people ask the question, is this a sign of early Alzheimer's, or is it what is called a senior moment? It is very difficult to make that distinction, and we have several studies where there is testing built into the study to see what is this? Is this a very early stage of this disease, or is it just something you can just shrug off? My disclosure is that I'm the principal investigator for several industry-sponsored clinical trials. I don't have stock in any of these companies. Whether the drug works or not is really not that important to me personally. We do the data, we get the data and submit it, and that goes to the FDA to see if the drug is safe and effective for the use of the country. But we are now working with a number of companies, Eisai, Lilly, Janssen, Athera, Cassava, and the National Institute of Health. I always start with this picture from the Sistine Chapel. It's on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the Judeo-Christian creation story, and there's God creating Adam. My thought from childhood was, what is this structure? It's such a strange and unusual structure that God is floating in. It looked like a cloud to me as a kid, and it's only later that we realized that it actually is the human brain. 400 years ago, Michelangelo put God in the human brain. And this is real. This is the vertebral artery, this is the pituitary stalk, and you see how God's role lines up with the Sylvian fissure. And I see this as a metaphysical message that, made in his own image. Everything that is marvelous, beyond human understanding, is represented in this brain of ours. If you look at the numbers, it's just mind-boggling. We have 100,000 miles of high-fidelity cabling in our brains. The stuff that HDMI port is a high-fidelity, high-speed cable. We have 100,000 miles of such cabling in our brains. There's over 100 billion neurons with more connections between them, they say, than there are stars in the universe. The size and the capacity of our brains is just mind-boggling. No pun intended. The flip side of it is that it's hard to figure out treatments for this wonderful organ. You can't put a thing into it like you can into a heart or a kidney or a stomach. It's in this closed box. But yet, we in the scientific world have figured out what goes wrong. And we're figuring out ways to fix it. And it's thanks to a global collaboration over the last 50 years that we now know more about the brain in the last 10 years than in the 100 years before that. And it's good for all of us because we're looking at potential treatments. So when you think that we are a little slow in brain science compared to, say, cardiology or gastroenterology, it's because we're dealing with something that is so much more complex, so much more difficult than a pump or a sewage system. So we're going to talk a little bit about the prevalence and cost of Alzheimer's disease, the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease. People always get this mixed up, even clinicians. What goes wrong with the brain? What are the stages of this disease? How do we diagnose it? And what are we doing in the world of clinical trials? And what is the trial process? I just want to make it clear that at present, there are no medicines that are approved by the FDA that are known to slow down the disease process. There was one drug that was approved under some controversy, aducanumab. It does remove the bad protein, the plaque, but it's not shown to be slowing the decline. So it's kind of a controversial question, but we do think that there is a lot of hope. And there are medicines that could actually answer this problem. So, how many of us know somebody who has Alzheimer's disease, or are we concerned about developing Alzheimer's disease, or that our loved ones might develop Alzheimer's disease? I raised my hand. My mother died of Alzheimer's disease in 2017, 5 years ago. We looked after her. So I know what it feels like, both as a clinician and as a family member. And there is reason to be concerned. And when we look at the epidemiological numbers, you will see. So first, let's understand, dementia is not a disease. Dementia is what we call a syndrome, like heart failure or kidney failure. There are many causes of heart failure. And there are many causes of kidney failure, many diseases. So dementia just means brain failure. It means that your brain has gone down to the point where you cannot be independent. And Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. When Alzheimer's disease progresses to a point, you develop Alzheimer's dementia, where you can, remember stuff, you can put on your clothes, you need help to feed yourself, and ultimately you need total care. That's the progression of Alzheimer's disease to Alzheimer's dementia. We have several people who come to our office who are in our trials who you would meet, you would not know they have Alzheimer's disease because they are in the early stages. So think of it like cancer. You have a nodule in the breast, it's not widespread disseminated cancer, you're not going to die right away. But if you allow that to spread, it becomes widespread cancer that can take you down. So dementia is not equal to Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's disease, if it progresses beyond a point, it becomes Alzheimer's dementia, and the medicines we have in development are looking to stop that from getting further. There are many other things that cause dementia, including drinking too much, HIV, COVID, playing football, many strokes, and so on. So anything that affects the brain can cause dementia. So let's look at the epidemiology part of this, the prevalence and cost of Alzheimer's disease. This is a scary statistic. There's a new case of Alzheimer's every 65 seconds in this country. So at the time that I've been speaking about, 15 people have developed Alzheimer's disease in the US. And this has gone up from every 67 seconds to being more frequent. There's about 5.8 million Americans with Alzheimer's disease, and I think this is an underestimate, and we'll look into that later. And the older you get, the more you are at risk for Alzheimer's disease. So if you look at people who are 65, it's 5% of those with Alzheimer's disease. If you look at people who are 70, it doubles to 10%. and so on, till by the time you get to 80, almost 40% of 80-year-olds have Alzheimer's disease at some level or the other. And this has been going up, as I said, and we expect that about 13 million people will have it by 2050. And here's the scary part. This disease is twice as common in African Americans as in Caucasians. There was a question about people from Afro-Caribbean countries, and that risk factor seems to be just as much. And here's the paradox for us as a clinical trial site. Even though Alzheimer's is quite twice as common in the African American community, the participation from the community in trials is in the single digits. Recently, thanks to our connection with Ms. Regina and Asla, we are seeing a lot more people people of color, people, African Americans taking part in studies. When these drugs are approved, the question will be asked, well, was it studied in people who look like me? And unless we have participation from the community, the answer will be not enough. Which is why we are here to try and bring this message out to the greater Philadelphia community, that we need people taking part in studies. And clinical trial population should look like the face of America. And we need widespread participation from the community. That's the one message we have here. So we are spending an inordinate amount of money on this disease. It was $355 billion in 2021. It's going to $1.1 trillion. Just to put it in context, the whole US economy is like $22 trillion today. So this is a huge amount of money. This single disease will bankrupt the entire healthcare system. And I say this not in jest. If all the people who are expected to develop Alzheimer's do develop it, we won't have enough trees to make depends for all those people. A simple thing, providing services. We won't have enough middle-aged people to look after all the older folk who will have Alzheimer's disease. In Japan, it's already happened. There's something called the population pyramid, where you have more young people at the base and fewer older people. That's turned the other way around. In Japan, you have a lot more older people and fewer middle-aged and younger people to look after them. And they are actually experimenting with robotic companions in Japan because they do not have people to look after their older folk. And if we don't do something about this disease, we are really in trouble. So what happens in the brain? In the field, we have this model called the ATN model. It's amyloid, tau, and neuroinflammation. I know this may sound a little difficult. I'll try and work through this. If you think about other diseases in the body, diabetes, hypertension, if you know someone who's got blood pressure problems, most of them are on multiple medicines to treat the same disease. Why? Because we have to hit the disease from different angles. There are different mechanisms of disease in the body. So if you have diabetes, you could be on an injectable, you could be on a couple of oral medicines. So we're hitting the disease from different areas. Similarly, in Alzheimer's disease, we're trying to hit it through different areas. One is the amyloid. Many people may have heard of plaques and tangles. Plaque is a kind of bad protein. The tangles are another bad protein in the brain called tau tangles. This amyloid, when it starts to collect in the brain, causes an inflammatory process in the brain. Think of it like rheumatoid arthritis, where it's like the autoimmune diseases. There's a process of inflammation that makes the disease even worse. So we are hitting this disease by developing medicines against the amyloid, against the tau, and against the neuroinflammation. And hopefully, 5 or 10 years from now, we will be able to prescribe it. That okay, we need to hit. We can measure how much amyloid you have, or how much tau you have, and then give 1 or 2 medicines against these. So this is the normal human brain on the left side, and this is when a person is in a nursing home with advanced Alzheimer's dementia. You see the cells, the gray matter has died. The fibers which take the message from the cells are still there. So if I lift my finger up, it's because the gray cells in one side of my brain are telling my finger to move, and the message comes through these white fibers. The cells die because of the accumulation of this bad protein, which is called the amyloid plaque. This is the normal brain with all the cells talking to each other, and here the plaque starts to cause the brain cells to shrivel and die. Where does this come from? It's a normal part of aging. The plaque is related to a protein that helps make memories, and as we get older, we're making more and more memories, and these little fragments of protein start to collect, and they become the amyloid plaque. The brain creates an inflammatory reaction to this to try and get rid of it, and that's the end, the neuroinflammation that I talked about. This plaque also causes the accumulation of these other small microproteins called tau tangles. Many of you may have heard of mad cow disease or CJD. That is a protein like this tau tangle. It spreads across the brain, and wherever it lands, it causes little inflammation. It causes little degeneration of the brain wherever it spreads. So once this tangle is released, it becomes a self-sustaining process that it's hard to stop. So obviously we want to detect this as early as possible and stop these bad proteins from spreading in the brain. So we are trying to hit this disease from multiple angles. This was a famous study done, published in Nature in 2014, I believe, yes. The Harvard Aging Brain Study. So we talked about the tangles. We can detect these tangles by injecting a radioactive tracer into the body, and it goes into the brain, and if you have the plaque, it lights up. So this is a person who is cognitively normal with no plaque in the brain. This is a person with Alzheimer's disease, all this, pink stuff. I'm a guy, I don't tell colors very well. But this stuff is the amyloid showing up. And this is the scary part of it. This person is CN, means cognitively normal, no memory problems, but has amyloid plaque in the brain. So on the outside they look perfectly fine, but they have this stuff in the brain. Two problems. 1 out of 3 people above 60 had this toxic protein collecting in the brain. And these people, when you looked at the memory center of the brain, it had already started to shrink with no symptoms on the outside. And that's where the scary part is. When I said, the prevalence of this disease can be a lot worse than what it seems to be, it's all these people. When I lecture in senior centers, I say, everybody look left, look right. There's 3 people, right? One of you has the amyloid in the brain. This was published in Lancet Neurology, and this is the time course of events. This is when the amyloid collects. This is when you have some brain damage. And this is where you have symptoms. So the red line is when the amyloid collects. The purple line is when you have the first symptoms of memory loss. It takes 15 years from the collection of the amyloid to the manifestation of the memory problems. So those people, the 1 in 3 people with the amyloid, are slowly having their brains damaged over time with no outward symptoms. And very often, when people come here with the memory problems, they are moving towards dementia because the tau tangles have already been released. So think of this like getting your colonoscopies or your breast exams. These are things that are happening under the hood that you don't see. And very often, why do we do colonoscopies? Because you can't see it. It's sitting in there. And the first manifestation we had was when someone starts coughing blood because it's spread to the lungs. So we do colonoscopies to find out whether you have this cancer lurking, or like the pap smear, or like your mammograms. So we are doing a study where we're looking to see if people have the amyloid, so we can keep it from going there, because it's a silent corrosion of your brain. So in the field we have 3 kinds of studies, or 3 stages. One is for preclinical Alzheimer's disease. Let me go back here. It's for people who are here, who don't have any symptoms. The next kind of study is for people who have memory problems, where you're wondering, is this Alzheimer's disease? Is this a senior moment? They're already starting to forget. So we have studies for people who are with mild cognitive impairment or memory problems. And we have studies for people who already reached the stage of dementia where they cannot look after themselves. These are people who are still able to live in the community. So, folks with early Alzheimer's, people with memory problems, and people with dementia, we have studies for every stage of this disease. So, who can qualify? People who are just curious to know, do I have Alzheimer's? Do I have the amyloid in my brain with no symptoms? You can come to us or another trial site like us and get tested. Or if you're having some memory symptoms, we can come out to places. I was talking to Deacon White. We can come to Triumph Baptist and we can do memory screening there. We did that several years ago. We go out to many communities and do memory screening to see, do we have symptoms? Is this something we need to do something more about, like getting blood pressure screening or glucose screening for diabetes? In our studies, we can do blood tests for the bad proteins and even brain PET scans to see if you have the amyloid in your brain. Just to put this in context, none of this is available through your regular insurance or your neurologist. It's only in the clinical trial world. Hopefully, if the studies we're doing are successful, this will be available maybe 3 to 5 years from now through your insurance. But right now, it's only through the research protocols that we have. So, how many of us know the symptoms of a heart attack? Many of us, right? Chest pain, sweating, passing out. How many of us know the symptoms of a stroke? Right? You can't talk, you're dribbling from one side, you feel weak on one side. How many of us know the symptoms of early Alzheimer's disease? Not too many, right? And that's part of the reason we're here, to educate you about the symptoms of early Alzheimer's disease. Most of you are leaders in your community, and we would like you to know these symptoms and take it to your community and help them with the early diagnosis of these conditions. Because if it goes beyond a point, sometimes there's too much damage in the brain, and it's hard to stop. Just think of it like your mammograms and your pap smears, and even getting an EKG. You want to diagnose these conditions as early as possible. So what are the symptoms of mild cognitive impairment? The first stages or the first outward manifestations. So let me tell you this not funny story, but it's kind of poignant. One of the retirement communities where we work, the social worker told me the story. Her father-in-law was a farmer in Arkansas, and she said, he's not quite there, he's slipping. And the family said, no, he's fine. He does his farming, he can fix his machines, all of that. There's nothing wrong with him. But here's the problem. What goes first is short-term memory. You can do the stuff you always did. Like we had a patient who ran a company. He was the CEO of a company. He went on a cruise and fell apart. Why? It's all new learning. It's not anything you've seen before. So this farmer with his wife one day, they decided to go and dump the leaves off the edge of the property. So he put all the leaves in his truck and they got to the edge and she said, wait, I'll go and signal you. you know. So he was looking at her in the rearview mirror and backed the truck, dumped the leaves, went back home, and was waiting for lunch and wondering, where's my wife? And he called people, where is she? Worried, this, that, oh, she must have gone shopping with her friends. And around 5 o'clock, there's a knock on the front door, and she's lying on the porch covered in blood. What had happened was, he took his eyes off the rear view, forgot she was there, ran over her twice. Fractured her pelvis, she crawled on her elbows all afternoon to get there. And guess what was the first thing he said? Where the heck were you all this time? Typical husband, I guess. And the thing is, she recovered and she looked after him till he died. The point here is that you can look perfectly normal on the outside and just forget a few things. And what we would like to convey to you is we need to pick up these early signs, and we need to signal to those folks that this is something, it's a symptom of a degenerative brain disease. So, a senior moment, it's sporadic, doesn't get much worse, you just forget a few things here and there. Mild cognitive impairment, first thing, the person himself or herself has the sense that my brain is not what it used to be. They look okay on routine work, and they forget new things. You know, forgetting recent events, conversations you had. The daughter calls and says, hey, tell dad to do this, mom forgets. Or they say, we'll go out for dinner at 6 o'clock, and you go back and say, when are we going for dinner? Where are we going for dinner? Who are we going for dinner with? Asking the same questions again and again, because the new recent memories are not being consolidated. Forgetting dates and appointments, getting lost, and it's more apparent in new situations. Here's the thing, in today's world, increasing use of reminders and technology. So the cell phone becomes your outsourced brain. Anything that we need to remember, we'll put in here. And yes, it helps you function, but it could hide the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. We have a patient who's in a study with us. I think it's about 3 years she's been in the study. She still works, and we think that she's not going down. What she did was, she was a software analyst, so as soon as she was told to do something, she would put it in her phone, and at the time the phone would remind her. And she would use her old memories to do the task, till the software changed, and she couldn't learn it. But it's amazing, she comes to our office, I see her getting her infusion, and she's working on the computer. So, point here is, when you need to use your software more, or cell phone, post-it notes, it could be because your brain is losing the ability to remember things. Difficulty with complex conversations, difficulty following the plot of movies, books, serials, Netflix series, you know. Who's doing what to whom? Who's this person? Why is this happening? It's all new and recent memory. And then you can also get more withdrawn socially. My mom was like that. You know, she would not sit with family anymore because when 7 people are talking, it didn't make sense to her. And we as physicians see that as depression, and we treat them with antidepressants. They don't work when it's early Alzheimer's disease. So the clinical trial process, I will not belabor that. I think we need to move forward. I know people have concerns about, you know, being in a trial, but I can tell you that this is a very fair, balanced, careful, thoughtful, medically appropriate way of handling folks who are getting medications. So what are the medicines we're using? One is the anti-plaque medicines. This is the medicine that I talked to you about, that lady I talked to you about is on. This is showing people who were on the placebo. After 18 months, the amyloid, if anything, is increased. The people on the drug, it's clearing out the amyloid. In fact, in 81% of patients, there was no amyloid. This is the 19% who had a little bit, So this drug is effective in clearing out the amyloid. This is a medicine we give intravenously. It goes into the brain and it breaks up the amyloid. It's like a smart bomb. It's targeted against the amyloid and goes and breaks it up. I call it the liquid plumber for the brain. You just put it in there and breaks up the bad stuff. And this is showing that it was able to slow the decline on 3 separate parameters of measuring, 3 different tests. This is another drug we're working on. This was published in the New England Journal of Medicine last March. Again, showing that there was a 32% slowing in the decline with this drug, donanemab. It's a Lilly drug. This was published again, as I said, in the New England Journal. Multiple parameters of improvement or decline. It slows the decline. This is the activities of daily living. This is a memory test. This is global functioning. Again, it's very encouraging to see that when it clears out the amyloid, it slows the decline. And if you look at the PET scans, you see the PET scans of people on placebo, and this is the PET scans of people on the drug. Again, it's clearing out the amyloid. Some people do have side effects. You can get brain swelling and little micro hemorrhages. For the most part, at Keystone, we've managed to handle our patients, in a proactive way, and we've not had any terrible outcomes. But in the old studies, about 25% of patients did have some episodes of brain swelling. We know how to handle it now. Giving people steroids either orally or intravenously helps to put out the swelling of the brain. So, what about people in the early stages? Remember I said that the amyloid can collect for 15 years before you have the symptoms? We are proud to be part of this National Institute of Health study, NIH, called the AHEAD study. It is Think Ahead of Alzheimer's Disease, for people who have no symptoms now but are just worried to know, do I have Alzheimer's disease? Especially if you have a family history. You could be more at risk. So you would get that medicine that I talked about, lecanemab. You get a full evaluation, blood tests, etc., including the PET scan to see if you have amyloid. And if you have amyloid, you get this medicine that could help to clear it out. These are prevention studies for people who have not yet had symptoms. And I think it's wonderful that, if these studies are successful, that we can do early diagnosis and intervene before people lose their brains. So we are, again, looking at medicines against the tau tangles and medicines against neuroinflammation. I will move forward quickly. I don't want to spend too much time. Here's the thing. We have potential treatments, but a study has shown that we need 70,000 people taking part in trials in the US alone to make cure a reality. We are nowhere near that. Nowhere. And that's part of my appeal to all of us as a community, folks who are in the Zoom part of it. We need to work together. And that's the bridge we're looking to build as a clinical trial site with the community and make this feasible. So what do? And I'm not saying come to our site. You don't have to come to Keystone. You can look up clinicaltrials.gov if you're far away from Philadelphia or you want to go to some other site. Look up for a trial site near you. If you'd like to come to our site, you can call us, send an email to our CCOT or Dion Boyser, who's our community liaison person. Come, connect, let's work together, let's find treatments. So to summarize, Alzheimer's is a growing national and global crisis. It's these bad proteins collecting in the brain that cause brain damage, the amyloid plaque and the tangles. Early diagnosis and treatment, especially in the pre-symptomatic stage, can help prevent it from getting worse. There's some role for lifestyle modification. I didn't talk about it in the talk itself, but controlling your weight, diet, glucose, exercising, regular sleep, and social connectivity can help, but it's best done from middle age onwards, not when you're having memory problems. And clinical trials that are targeting this illness at multiple stages through multiple mechanisms are showing promise. And we can find treatments for this terrible disease, but we need to work together. That's it from me, Ms. Regina. Thank you. We will take questions at the end, so just hold your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Verghese. I want to thank Dr. Arns for hosting us today. And I want to welcome and thank all for attending today, in person and on Zoom. First, a brief description of Asala. Dr. Carter G. Woodson was the second Negro man to earn a PhD from Harvard, and he was the son of enslaved parents. In Chicago, he convened a meeting of 4 men of the talented 10th. All were contemporaries of Dr. Woodson, highly educated, and together they formed the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, commonly used the acronym at that time, ASNLH. Within the first year, Asala, as ASNLH, hosted its first annual conference, sharing its research on Negro life and history, because, according to the books, the Negroes had no history. In 1916, the association created the Journal of Negro History, publishing research, primary sources, and association business matter. In 1926, the association created the Negro History Week in honoring the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. In 1976, this will be commonly called the organization now, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and President George Ford, expanded Negro History Week to Black History Month. Currently, at the dawn of the 21st century, the association continues the publication of the Journal of Black History. African American History Month continues to grow not only nationally, but globally. But we're open to all persons interested in researching, preserving, and sharing the life and history of African descendant people. Dr. Carter Woodson fancied Philadelphia because of his mentee, Judge Raymond Pace Alexander. And we hosted the fourth conference in 1924 here in Philadelphia. And Dr. Woodson says Philadelphians attended the conference in considerable numbers, participating in the proceedings, and had themselves enrolled as co-workers in the effort to save the record of this selected group of the population. Asala Philadelphia Heritage was the first branch chartered in 1927, and we are the oldest continuous branch today. Let's jump up to today. The 2022 Asala theme is Black Health and Wellness. Many of the branches are taking a global view of the theme, using the components of the wellness wheel. So we started out in January with COVID. In February, we did financial wellness, and then I'll talk about how we came to doing this intellectual, social, I think it covers so many parts of this wellness wheel. Dr. Verghese gave you the statistics, but in Dr. Martin Luther King's words, he said, when America catches a cold, the Negro catches pneumonia. And the research indicates that all Americans are susceptible but in particular, the Hispanic and my fellow baby boomer demographics. I'm personally interested in Alzheimer's research because of my family history. I participated in 2 screenings for the markers for Alzheimer's. Then lifestyle maven B. Smith greatly affected me. I was not Martha Stewart in my home. I was B. Smith. My mother would jokingly say, "What's for dinner? Are we having another experiment again?" I said to Mom, "Well, who else am I going to experiment on?" Because I just love B. Smith. B. Smith was the same age as me when she was diagnosed. How could this be? B. Smith had many accomplishments at first, but faced his diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's with grace. She was about 63. Educating the public about Alzheimer's became her next goal, in hopes of eliminating the stigma of this disease. B. also discussed the prevalence of Alzheimer's in Black women, later writing Before I Forget, with her husband Dan, a book about their experiences in facing disease. Among the topics is a focus on living with Alzheimer's with dignity and encouraging families, caregivers, and public to never lose sight of the person living with this disease. This is a quote from the Alzheimer's Wild, February 2022. So when I saw the Facebook for the head study, I immediately signed up. I went through the list. It was at Penn, and said no. Another one at Abington. It was at random. I chose Keystone, but it wasn't at random. It was a guide link. Because there I met Dr. Lippman first, and he gave me the statistics as well about how few African Americans participate in the research. Then I had the call from Dr. Verghese. With his passion and heart to share his innovative research, I knew I had to partner with him. And our branch is very appropriate because it's a grading branch. But the members were very excited, and a few members went up to do their individual screening because we wanted to know. And I just was informed we have our first community meeting is scheduled for June. Most importantly, we ask that you share this innovative research and clinical trials with your family, friends, neighbors, churches, social and fraternal organization. But the key thing, if anything you might have heard from Dr. Verghese, you have to come in early. And that's one thing our communities, myself included, the doctors, the social worker will tell you for hospice, people see the signs, particularly families don't want to see it, but we have to come in early. Please share the word everywhere and help Dr. Verghese get the word out so his trials can be accurate when they go for FDA approval. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Here's the email for our branch. Please stay in touch. We will have another one tomorrow. So you won't be able to get this in there. So you know anybody, go home, you want to hear this again, please have them come out. This is our second meeting. We had one during the day. This is the evening meeting for the younger people who might be taking care of a loved one. I see you have questions.
I was just going to ask you how you said why the number of African Americans in the trials is more. Is it because people just simply don't know about the trials, or is it because they're hesitant to get involved?
Judy.
Well, no, they don't know. That's why we're trying to get the research out. But we still hear, I heard from the vaccination, some of us still want to talk about Henrietta Lacks and the Tuskegee experiment. But, you know, as I say, I'm not discounting that, but this was then. Dr. Whitman went over that agreement line by line by line. So we want to get you there. So at least you'll get there and get the information and you can be informed. So they will definitely inform you now, which they weren't then. And then you must realize, well, I'm not going to recommend the internet, but the information is out there. But we have to make sure our communities take advantage of it.
If you want.
Just as a young lady led to people in the African community, African American community, have and share a general distrust of the medical profession because of the Tuskegee experiment, because those were Caucasian individuals perpetrating help and study to try to better the conditions of these African American people when they were lying to them. So how can we now, in clinical trials where this groundbreaking therapeutics are just about coming to fruition, how can we better the trust between the African American community and the medical profession when you have the Tuskegee experiment out there that refuted all of that?
I guess, it's going to be, as they say, having an elephant one at a time. So I think bringing Dr. Verghese to the church will be more comfortable. And then one of the things in the round table side, be careful how you set it up. Have round tables, maybe I've been trying, you have a community center, right?
Yes.
You can set up so you can get the feel. Because I felt this part. That's what I'm saying. I felt this part. And we have to recognize it. But I was just sharing with I'm medical consent for a cousin who's not cognitively functioning. And they won't do a procedure on him without calling somebody. And the doctor at Temple called me. He was talking a mile a minute. So we have to educate the whole people. Because, I had to say something. Which blood type is it? We don't have that yet. You call me for the consent. Do you have blood? You may have blood, but you don't know the blood type. So we have to educate our own people ourselves. That you got to be able to speak up, ask one questions. So needless to say, in this short conversation, I'll call you back and I have your information. And that's what we're calling back up. Decide whether or not you get consent. I think that. Dr. Verghese, what would you say?
Well, can you hear this? Okay. The question was about why aren't more African Americans taking part in trials, and I would extend that to people of color as well. I'm of Indian, Asian descent, and if you talk to people from my community about taking part in trials, there is a general sense of distrust with the establishment, but nothing as horrible as the Tuskegee experiment has happened to the Asian community or the Hispanic American community. Granted, it was a horrible, it was a lie, and it was a useless experiment to try and figure out the stages of syphilis when we already knew that. There was no purpose, no scientific or medical purpose in doing that. And they just let people die so that somebody could write a paper or whatever. But some good came out of it, in that when this was out in the New York Times, they set up what was called the Belmont Commission. That was in the early 70s, I think. And they came up with 3 principles, which was justice, autonomy, and beneficence. That people should have the autonomy to decide, should I take part in this or not? And they should get full information. And it should benefit not just the bigger community, but the people who are taking part in the study as well. So that led to what is called the informed consent process, what Ms. Regina was talking about, what Dr. Lippman goes over each patient, with each patient, outlining what the study is about, that it is voluntary, you can withdraw at any time. It talks about the medical care that goes into the trial process, all the blood work, the EKGs, the physical exams, the PET scans, and what will happen in case something goes wrong. That if you have a side effect, that the study will have paid for the medical care of the person, that we will not be charging the person's insurance. And it's voluntary. You can change your mind anytime. And it also outlines all the side effects that could be expected logically. And it also gives a number for an ombudsman. If you don't like the trial doctor, you think that they're not being fair to you, who to call and complain to. And all of this is, explained. And so the bad stuff from the Tuskegee experiment or across the study led to some goodness. And today we have, this whole informed consent process, and there's a federal agency called OHRP, Office for Human Research Protection, which is supervised by the FDA. And they could walk into our trial site anytime. There's complete transparency, and the risks, benefits, and alternatives are constantly being evaluated. So I would think that it's as fair and open a process as you could possibly get now and has ever been. Yes.
So, to piggyback on what both of you were saying, I am a radio show host, and we have conversations weekly about this. When COVID
You want to come and speak into
Yes, sorry. When COVID hit, it wasn't that African Americans did not want to take the vaccine. The biggest issue that we're having, and for anyone who's a physician in this room, I'd like you to hear me and hear me succinctly, is that when we go to the regular doctor's visits, we are dismissed often, we are not heard, we are told that it's all in our minds, and so if you don't treat us well on a regular doctor's visit, it's probably why you don't see us until the situation is absolutely dire. I am going to suggest that we go back into the medical schools and tell the doctors, and you understand, you know your work, you're doing your work, but you have to spend time looking at all patients fairly. I am a 55-year-old woman who continues to fire my doctors until I find the right ones who are listening to me to make sure that I am okay. And so that is part of the major issue. So when you just discussed about all the processes, when I interview you tomorrow, that's the first thing I wanted to start with. Because if you don't do that, then they're not going to hear you. And then we want to make sure that folks can be introduced to the people that are in the clinical trials, the doctors and the nurses and the medical staff that's going to be seeing us and taking care of us. We know we need to be a part of it. We need you to do better. Thank you.
Thank you. That is something that the whole medical profession does have to take on board. And both my daughters are just finishing their residency, and I've followed them through their medical school and their residency process, and diversity and inclusiveness is a big part of what they're being taught. It's not going to wipe out the sins and the attitudes of many of the people in the medical profession now, but I think we're seeing better days.
All right, we have a question from online.
So, you had a question in the back.
On the last slide, we talked about this lifestyle changes that can prevent progression of Alzheimer's. We know of very specific things that people do or would avoid that makes Alzheimer's more likely.
So the question is about lifestyle options that we can exercise, and this is a question I get frequently. What can I do to prevent this? And let me give you an example from my own life. I'm
Asian American males. My dad had 2 heart attacks before he was 60. So as a younger man, I would work out and control my diet. My cholesterol was 250. It's genetic. If I had not done that, it would have been even worse. But I've been on a statin for the last 25 years. That has helped to control my cholesterol. I'm 62, touch wood, I have not yet had a heart attack. So the point is that lifestyle can interact with disease and with medications, but lifestyle is not enough if you have a strong genetic predisposition. So controlling, your diet, your cholesterol, your glucose, your blood sugar, your weight in middle age can help lower the risk of Alzheimer's to some extent. Some things that really help is aerobic exercise, regular sleep. These are things that help with managing that. But if you have a strong genetic predisposition, it may slow it down, it may delay it, it won't stop. We do know that when we develop disease-modifying treatments, that can help stop it completely. So, in the absence of anything, these lifestyle modifications are useful, but with all diseases, whether it's cancer, HIV, depression, it's medicine and lifestyle working together. And we need to bring that in. But thank you for bringing that up. Aerobic exercise helps a lot of things.
Is there a question from online?
I actually think we covered most of them. That was no last question.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about this goes back to funding of clinical trials and 3 years ago in terms of the education aspect, right? We're talking about trying to get the marginalized communities more involved in clinical trials. Some of that has to come not just from, I think, getting to the 56-year-olds, but actually getting into your elementary schools, getting into your middle schools, your high schools, because those are the resources that we have. We find that our older folks will listen to the younger folks, and the younger folks they are very, very persistent. Once they get that message, they don't stop with it. And so I think more of the funding from NIH or whoever needs to be focused there in terms of being a part of the fund that's coming in for clinical trials. I run a program at Temple for marginalized students who are undergrads, but I'm trying to get them all into PhDs, they're all doing research, they're all either black or brown or, so I'm sitting here saying, but nobody's approached me to say, could we come and talk to your students? They're all black or brown. These are the ones out there interfacing with your community. They're either MDs or PhDs or PhDs. They're running research. If I see somebody looking like me who comes from my community, I'm much more likely to want to be a part of that thing than having somebody that I have no trust in coming to try to tell me to be a part of something that I already trust.
For the folks on the Zoom, I just want to repeat the point that if we want to bring this idea of inclusivity and trust in the medical profession, we need to not just work with the older folk, but younger people in schools and colleges, and help bring them into the circle of knowledge and trust in the field. And I'll be happy to come and lecture.
And I'm going to chime in the same thing with Dr. Verghese. This is our theme this year. There's 2 branches in the city. And I don't know who you are, but this is the purpose of this. So hopefully you'll stay for dinner and we'll talk. And you get the card. Because there's 2 branches working on this in Philadelphia. Okay?
dinner in the room next door, and let's continue this conversation, and let's not just have this talk here, but let's stay connected. We have these little cards on your, is it in the chair or? Okay. So we want your thoughts on where we can take this, because it's not enough to just vibrate the molecules of air in this room and feel good now, but it's like giving a good sermon. Okay, what do we do next? How do we take this and incorporate this into our lives? So let's keep this conversation. We have some cards for you to fill out. Give us your thoughts. How can we join together? Thank you all.